Welcome, 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 welcome to my live. Let me give a shout out of thanks to my subscribers. You know that without you returning or leaving feedback, my channel could not continue as it does. Much love for that. For those of you who have returned and have not quite made that decision to subscribe yet, what are you waiting for? For those of you who are new to the channel, thank you for joining us today. And thank you all for joining the My History Verified channel. I am your quirky ASF Hood genealogist, and I do not need any permission to study my ancestry and genealogy and the history of the world. So, no certification will be displayed at all on this journey. And now that we are over that, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Okay, you are on this learning curve journey with me, and not only will it help us to understand the terminology and tasks your genealogy and ancestry research often runs into, but the laws, events, and occurrences of race and ethnicity. They both, being the constraints, help to shape with the stroke of a pen when our ancestors lived so long ago. We will continue our journey of the reading of chapters 3 and 4 from the book titled The History of Ancient America Anterior to the Time of Columbus, providing the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites by George Jones, written between the dates of 1810 and 1879. For those of you who do not know where this book is, it is here, and I will show it to you. And of course, it is coming from the Library of Congress. So there you have it there. It's on the screen. There you go. The History of Ancient America Anterior to the Time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aborigines with the Tyrians and Israelites. All right, now let's get back to it. If you have not taken the time to view my past video, the reclassification of the North and Southeast Coast Amerindian taped as a live stream, please do so. I have already completed reading the last 2 chapters and hope that you can follow along with me using such a credible source and conceptualize the harm many of the people of the past placed upon the original land dwellers based on race and ethnicity. And they did this with a writing pen and biases that always turned into laws. And the laws governed the land masses and the power and control over the descendants of the original North and South East Coast Aborigines today. I will continue to use this book reading to interpret what the author wanted the King of Prussia to know of his findings, even though he clearly did so in paragraph 1, which consists of nearly 20 plus pages of its 492 pages. It is a valuable read for all, especially the descendants of the Aborigines, the reclassified African American today. Let us begin our edification of this powerful linguistics of the truth of a people By large, who have not yet figured out who they are again or have yet to figure themselves out. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Beginning with chapter 3. And in your spare time, of course, I recommend that you go back to the book. It is a free download at the Library of Congress to begin reading, or utilize your copy as something you can follow along with me. Chapter 3, First Epoch, the Tyrian era before Christ, 332 years, the landing in Mexican, in other words, Central America, of the ancient Tyrians of Phoenicia, and the building of the cities, temples, and pyramids, the ruins of which have lately been discovered. Remember, this is a writing between 1819. So well, actually, they were not um, founded in the 1800s, of course. We know that. We know when they were built prior to the colonizers coming to, but we're talking about the actual findings and the documentation. And at the time of this reading, or at the time of this book having been uh, read or actually published, and the findings given to King Prussia, it is between 1817 and forward. It is the arrangement of facts and arguments for the present volume. In the endeavor to establish this important epoch, recourse must be had to the same train of argument as that used in the preceding pages, viz., that where the written law does not exist, that which is unwritten must be brought forward as evidence to support and sustain conclusions, and to this must be added the powerful witness of strong and perfect analogy for the essential purposes of identity. Believing that the reader is convinced that the natives of North America are of a distinct race to those inhabiting the portion of the continent as already illustrated by the constraints in the religious and political policies, and even by their physical analogies, the necessity now arises of completely identifying those of Mexican America as we have slightly those of the North, sufficient, however, for the division of the races. In the preceding title of the first epoch of the history is not only stated the nation from whence they came, but even the year in which they landed. To support these startling assertions, to much their truth apparent to the reader, to convince his understanding and crush all doubts, that even history may place the volume within her archives, requires a basis of argument which shall be rock built, that the superstructure about to be raised while it invites many, yet resists no, not, or nor defy the storms and shafts of criticism, but as a strong cemented edifice requires the warm influence of the sun to secure the component parts. So, do we look for the sun's smile from the just and mild eye of the true critic, which will not glance upon only one part of the composition, but view each as required to form the consistency of the entire building? And when the edifice is finished, whether the entablature will remain blank or bear our humble name is not for us to determine or command. Yet, in reference to the latter and natural hope, the sentiment of the senator of Utica will direct us that if we cannot command success, at least we will endeavor to deserve it. The following investigation and arrangements of argument are required for the elucidation of this epoch, and then from the summary of evidence, and from that only, the reader, as a jury, will form his verdict. This Tyrian theory, founded upon analogies, traditions, history, and prophecy. And lastly, the fulfillment of the Tyrian prophecies of Isaiah in the Western Hemisphere also establishes with the division of the Aborigines into two races, Tyrian and Israelitish, and their conquerors. The actual accomplishments of Noah's malediction and his prophecy of the human family. These astounding and new discovered facts will form a concluding chapter for the complete annihilation of the of atheistical denial, meaning atheistical denial of prophetic truths. These prophetic facts are not essential to the support of this history. They are but the seals to the document. Going on to chapter 4. Remember, this reading is Greg Jones's investigation beginning with the first two chapters that have already been read, leading to the more than one volume of this subject matter being presented to the King of Prussia, determining in fact the Aborigines, those reclassified to colored, Indian of North America, Amerindian, Black, mulatto, and now African American, are the descendants of the Israelites. Chapter 4. The fine arts as authorities for historical records investigated and established. Section 1. Architecture and sculpture. If it was possible to place within an Ephesian temple every historic book, manuscript, and engraving in the world, and then the sacrilegious torch of a modern Erostratus should entirely consume them, whereby the only apparent knowledge to be obtained would be from tradition. Yet the marble and stone quarries of the earth have issued those volumes composed and fashioned by the hands of man that would restore the progressive history of the arts and civilization. Architecture has erected his lofty temples, palaces, and mansions, and sculpture has, with her magic wand, charmed and adorned them with the historical facts, legends, and romance. The former planned the porticos, columns, and proportions. Give me 1 second. Seems like what I need is not up here. Okay, let's see. There we go. All right. I had the wrong scroll up. I am on page 58 of the PDF, but it's going to be page 37 of the book. I will continue. Whereby there were fashioned and embellished architecture by his peculiar characteristics gives intelligence as we wander amid his works, that we are on the land of Egypt or the plains of Pestion, of the Acropolis of Athens or the land of Romulus and the Colosseum, and whether we gaze upon the sky pointing pyramid, the stern of the graceful Doric, the Ionic of the Ilices, or the acanthus crowned Corinthian, they one and all have voices of oracular power proclaiming to the classic scholar the nation from whence they arose to life and beauty. Even the horizontal and curved lines of architecture have their especial records, for they state the time in the history of the arts when they were erected, even without a sculpture cipher, for the level lines of these Cyclopean and Egyptian walls with their attendant apertures give certain knowledge that they were erected before the principle of the Grecian arc was known or practiced. Sculpture has more harmonious voice than that of her stern consort, the graceful bride whose rock-ribbed cradle amid the Parian hills, whose virgin youth reposed upon the Haliacon marble of Pentelicus, has a voice of warm yet chaste, sorry about that, yet chaste simplicity. Her tones are sweet as from lips first nourished on Hymena's hill, yet at times they speak with all the solemnity of her consort, around whom she fondly clings, as the ivy around the oak, and like the plant and tree, the sculptured vine preserves for ages the character of the marble monarch of the arts, even after his broad spreading authority has been broken and humbled to the earth by time and desolation. Or these two destroying powers may be viewed as the Regan and the Goneril, while architecture is the lyre and sculpture the Cordelia of the arts. Even as the note of music struck from a chord of natural vibrates to the heart, in like manner does the sculpture in like manner does the voice of sculpture reach and echo around the walls of life. It is poetry's di, diapa- diaspon. It speaks of God and his works, of man in his intellect, and glory of woman in her charity and beauty. It speaks a language which the unlettered may translate, while to her more subdued or secret tones the disciples of her heavenly power have but to listen or behold her action of utterance as developed in her free or drapered limbs to give the history of her thoughts, nor have those thoughts or attitudes chaste as the marble they inhabit, even been conquered by lust or luxury. That unworthy conquest was reserved for the false principles of her faith, yet not one, or correction, yet not over herself, but her fair handmade painting. But architecture and sculpture have lived on, severe and chaste, stern and graceful, majestic and beautiful, as when they were first created from the Eden of the mind. No sword of wrath has driven them forth to wander as outcasts, but as messengers of peace. They have visited every limb. They have raised their temples and cities in every land, subjected to one power only, the insatiate monster of the earth, time, the twin born with creation, and who will be the last mourner of nature. In her name. Yet even when their children have been struck down like Niobes by the by the shafts of fate, still how beautiful in ruins. Although prostrate upon the earth, yet even in death, they have voices as speaking from the tomb. But the parents still live on, ever young and immortal, and can point to the proud remains of their fallen children, and with the voice of historic proclaim their fateless epitaph and character. Egypt, my firstborn and consort of the Nile, while thy pyramids and temples shall remain, and they will even to the final tempest of the world. Thou shalt be identified from among all the nations of the earth. Athens, my favorite daughter, until the rock of the Acropolis shall fall, thy classic beauties, around which have gleamed the meridian splendor of the mind, will proclaim that Minerva, Plato, uh, Pericles, and Phidias were thy own. Palmyra, my third joy, although the wild Arab sleeps within thy roofless dwelling, with the whirling sands for his nightly mantle, yet while thy porticos, arches, and the colonnades shall be seen, the city of the desert will live in memory, for the spirits of Longinus and Zenobia will be there. Rome, my warrior son, thy ancient glory lives in the recorded evidences of the parents' art, for amid the ruined columns of thy forum glide the spectral forms of Romulus, Junius, Virginius, Brutus, Cato, and of Cicero. Through thy arches move those of Septimus, Vespasian, Titus, and of Constantine. And dost thou not speak to all the world from the solemn historic voice of thy giant Colosseum? But beyond all this, from the ashes of thy former magnificence, like the phoenix upon the spot of the martyrdom, thou hast risen in double splendor to the glory of the Savior and the faith of the apostle, and to the triple fame of Bramante, Raphael, and Angelo. These are the still living metropolitan records of bygone days from the heathen of the Christian. They cannot be rejected. From them we trace and prove the areas of the world. Sculpture has also her own prerogative, apart and separate from her Lord, as a dower right, a jointure power of instruction, and what immortal pupils has she not produced? They stand as the models of art and intellect, each unapproached, solitary, and beautiful. The human eye contemplates them with the chaste wonder of creation's daughter, Eve. When from the banks of Eden's limpid waters she first gazed upon the mirrored image of herself, the Jupiter of Elias, the Minerva, and the triple fates of the Parithian, the Medicean Venus, and her sister of the bath, the gentle Antonius, and the Athenian Phocian, the Pythonian Victor, sun clad Apollo, the serpent strangled priest, and sons of Troy, all speak the intellectual power of their mistress. And even the poor Roman captive, the death struck gladiator, has been raised by her magic wand from the sandy dead correction been raised by her magic wand from the sandy death bed of the Colosseum to live on, unconquered to all posterity. Sculpture is a title not only applicable to statuary, but to every kind of architectural stone ornament and in every stage towards its completion, from the rough quarried block to the polished marbles of the frieze and pediment. This being admitted, how vast and almost unlimited is the field of correction is the field for historic contemplation. The antiquary, when he removes the trodden earth from the moldering tomb to trace the deeds of heroes, or from an antique gem or metal, raises to light from beneath the dark dust of ages, the bold outline of an imperial head, or when within the lava colored city, a hidden statue from beneath the veil of centuries burst upon his bewildered sight. He still remembers that sculpture was the creative power. The traveler who pauses in silent wonder as he views the Egyptian pyramids, blocks of stone raised to perpetuate a nameless king, turns with redoubled pleasure to contemplate the sculptures or the sculptured marble of Tentyria, in the sight of those in the sight of whose shrines the followers of Napoleon felt amply repaid for the dangers they had passed. Although the Assyrian kings have for ages been covered with the sands of their desert, and the wandering Arab sleeps unmolested in the shade of Palmyra's columns, unconscious of his mighty mansion, yet her temples and porticos speak loudly for the living truth of his historical marble. The word unmolested means to be untouched, and he's trying to say that the sun and nothing else bothered him. Greece, the wonder of the classic age, the key stone in the arch of intellect, owes her glory to Marathon and Salamis. But her living name breathes from the sculpture of the Acropolis, the proportion given by Ignatius to the body of the Parthenon is fast falling to decay, while the sculptured mantle of Phidias, which adorns it, adds regality to splendor, and every stone that falls produces but another graceful fold to the gorgeous drapery. Sculpture still preserves Sycamus amid the wreck of time, as when Marcellus wept tears of joy at beholding his mighty conquest. It still points out Carthage, the fatherland of Hannibal, as when Marius, upon a prostrate column, mourned her desolation. Mysterious Paestum has no other monument, for her deeds have perished with her records. From Istria to Dalmatia may be traced the historic progress of the art. The gate of the Sergi, theater of Pola, and the palace of Diocletian, whose columned wall is mirrored in the Adriatic, all bear convincing testimony. And for the ancient Rome, it is her living history. The Statorian columns of the Forum, lifting high their leafy brows, proclaim the spot where Romulus checked the bold advance of the Sabine Tatius. Those solitary shaft of Corinthian form and grace, giving fame to Focus, the Ionic columns of Concordia's temple, proudly point the place where Cicero impeached the blood-stained Catiline, while the triumvirate columns of the Tonus Jupiter preserve the imperial name that witnessed the Redeemer's birth. The Arch of Titus, where the composite first shone forth, heralds the conquest of Jerusalem. Disclaimer: I am not in any way implying where Jerusalem is or where Egypt is. I have my own thoughts about where all of this is, but I am only reading what has already been documented. Is sculpture a Jewish basilisk? For none of that nation dare pass beneath its gateway. The Arch of Constantine, robed in sculptured history, records the battle with Maxentius, the first victory beneath the banner of the cross, and gained by the Christian prince after his conversion by the vision of the holy sign. The column of Antonius still preserves the deeds of the philosophic Marcus, and while the equestrian statue of the Capitoline Hill presents the figure of Aurelius. The group trophies of Marius make known the conquest of the Cimbri. The column of Trajanus blazons forth the war of the Daci, thereby transmitting to all ages the costume and weapons of the captives and of the imperial victors. The circular and column edifice speaks of Vesta, her virgins, and the heathen's perpetual altar flame. The giant arches near the forum of a temple to the god of peace, while the earth-buried palace of the Esquiline contain the moving form of that son of war. Son as in son and daughter, not sun and sky. But we know that it converts when it comes to the word. Who fell beneath the patriot and the tower, perpetuate Agrippa, Cestius, and Metella's fame. The triple monument of the Appian Way tells the historic tale of the first victory that consolidated Rome in early freedom. It speaks of the Corinthian brothers who fell for Alba, of the Horaci that fell for Rome. The classic eye, in viewing those time honored tombs, looks through a vista of near 3,000 years. It gazes upon the Horatian triumph and his spoils. It sees a widowed sister's upraised hands in malediction. It beholds that sister's death from a brother's patriot sword, a sculptured frieze and cornice upon a lone pilastered house in the most humble street of Rome. Speak to the passerby that within those shattered walls once dwelt the last of the tribunes, Petrarch's friend, renowned Rienzi, then the blood cemented Colosseum. It is an history within itself, commencing with its founders, Vespasian and Titus, and its builders, the poor captives from Jerusalem. It encloses all the savage and succeeding emperors whose mantles of coronation were there dyed in human gore. Domitian, Commodus, Valerian, and the long line of insatiate murderers of the early Christians, and even Trajan suffered the sands of that arena to receive the mangled body of an apostle's minister, Ignatius of Antioch, who died like Polycarp of Smyrna for that faith which claimed death in cruel torments rather than apostasy, from whose lips may have passed the same sentiment as from his successor in, uh, martyrdom. 80 and 60 years have I served him, and he has done me no injury. How then can I blaspheme my king and my savior? Architecture erected the Colosseum, but sculpture like a funeral pall mantles this human slaughterhouse of Rome, not a stone of which from the base to the ruined cornice, but has an historic voice that speaks as from the Arimanthian sepulchre of our religion, of the final resurrection of those early martyrs to the faith of Christ, the humble gravestone of the village churchyard. They're talking about where they persecuted any of Christ's followers. Rome did this when they, after he was crucified, and then they began to persecute any of his believers, and then the religion was taken over and utilized for financial gain. Let me see. All right, go back one. Is received as legal evidence of death. It speaks a name, a date, and burial. The Acropolis, as the tomb of Athens, can do no more, save that it is the record of a nation's downfall and not a peasant's. Sculpture can speak even of the religious mind of the deceased, bring it to memory, and instruct us as to the means whereby the departed attained his hope of salvation. It presents the transparent medium through which he gazed upon futurity and believed in his approach to God. For the cross or crescent upon a tombstone needs no other language to inform the passerby that the departed was a follower of Christ or Muhammad. If then the mind of a solitary corpse can, as it were again by vivified, by merely, I'm going to reread that, as it were again be vilified, as it were again be vivified by merely contemplating the sculptured emblem of the dead, and that from a single gravestone may not entire nations be historically resuscitated within the human eye and mind are brought to gaze upon and investigate whole cities of ruins with their sculptured temples, tombs, and palaces. Yes, though they should be found amid the darkened forests of the western continent, whether the panther and beasts of prey were thought alone to dwell. Yes, Palenque, I think it's Palenque, Copan, Chiapas, and their mural sisters have historic voices for posterity from their cities of the dead, and the Pompeii and the Merculani of the Western Hemisphere, yet more aged and vulnerable than even those victims of Vesuvius. Architecture and sculpture then claimed the right to be received as undeniable evidences of historical record, and as such, those two branches of the fine arts will be admitted by the reader in support and in illustration of the epoch now under investigation. Ictinus, Phidias, and Praxiteles, Bramante, Jones, and Wren, Canova, Chantry, Chantry, and Gino may justly be regarded as historians, for from the volumes of their art, events, and eras can be traced and established. Section 2, the paintings. Painting, the most beautiful in the triumvirate of the arts, proudly follows sculpture in her classic path. The president's only yielded as to one of elder birth, who, attired in her snow white raiment, marches forward with majestic step, casting her shadow to the confines of history, while her graceful follower, clad in the rainbow tinted garments and having no shadow of herself, receives her colored brilliancy from the glowing sun of genius, and thence in gratitude reflects back her pictorial light to illuminate the mind. This delightful art may be defined to be a species of poetic and historic writing, and subservient to the same ends of the expression of ideas and events of nature and her children. It bears witnesses, correction, it bears resemblance to the diamond in the dark recesses of the earth, which by its own innate quality emits sparkling rays of lights, thereby not only discovering its own splendor, but giving a luster to obscurity. Painting has her direct claims to be received as authority for past events and records, and in illustration may be cited the life and history of the Savior. The pictorial art alone was for centuries the only record whereby the mass of the people would read that sacred life. The cross upon the banners, shields, and pennons of the Crusaders spoke to the Christian heart, even above the din of arms of the yell of battle. When the Latin was the general tongue of prayer and preaching, the pictorial art sprung into life with redoubled power, and from the painting above the altar representing the crucifixion, the people learned that Christ suffered. It alone reached the heart and understanding, while the Latin language reached only the ears of the unlettered. Has not the life of the Redeemer been traced through every event by the painter's magic art? The Annunciation, Nativity, Disputation in the Temple, Healing the Sick and the Blind, Last Supper and Sacrament, Rejection by Pilate, Crucifixion, and the Resurrection and Transfiguration are the pictorial volumes of our religion. Angelo, Da Vinci, Raphael, Murillo, Rubens, and West were as essentially historians of sacred events as Plutarch, Livy, Tacitus, Gibbon, Hume, and Robertson were those of a national and political character. Painting has traced upon the galleries of Versailles the chief events of the French kingdom of the empire and its glory. And in the present day, the new walls of England's parliament are to be decorated with her deeds of chivalry, sacred to her historic and undying fame. The walls of the American Capitol contain the imperishable history of Washington. I'm going to reread that again. The walls of the American Capitol contain the imperishable history of Washington and the freedom of the Western Hemisphere. We're talking about the indigenous of every island, and especially the north and south east coast of the America. Paintings then will not be rejected as evidence of events or of religious and national records. Section 3, referring to coins and medals. These are admitted species of historic evidence and as lasting ones, perhaps beyond all others. A series of them is the most certain method of arranging a chronological tablet and thereby preserving the data of history, mythology, portraits, customs, and art. The reader will excuse the relation of an anecdote to which may be traced the production of the present work. At the early age of 9 years, a small ancient coin came into the accidental possession of the writer. Its stamp and character were enveloped in mystery, and recourse was had to an antiquary to decipher them. The obverse of the coin contained a profile head, and around it the letters A as in apple, V as in Victor, G as in girl, V as in Victor, S as in Sam, T as in Tony, V as in Victor, S as in Sam, all caps. On the reverse, a temple with the doors closed, surmounted by the word Providentia, Providentia. The explanation was as follows: This, a coin of the Augustus Caesar temple, was that of Janus, the doors of which had been open for nearly 2 centuries as emblematical of the continuance of Roman warfare with foreign countries. But on the coin, COIN, the doors were closed, and with the words of thanksgiving were symbolical of universal peace, those proving that the coin was struck the very year in which the Savior was born. Thus, upon one coin were illustrated the features of the second Roman emperor, mythology, cessation of the war, the downfall of Brutus and Cassius, the defeat of Antony, and the birth of Christianity. This simple incident made so powerful an impression upon the boyhood of the relator that to it he has always traced the foundation of his scriptural, historical, and poetical studies, together with an enthusiastic devotion to the fine arts. The description of the above coin will illustrate the historical intelligence to be derived from their perusal. A medal is an especial mode of recording tributary honor to individuals, literary, civil, or military. They become heirlooms and family possessions and are transmitted from sire to son as absolute records of their ancestors' fame. They are also struck in celebration of national events and thence become records of a people. So assured was Napoleon of this, that a series of his medals are a complete history of his victories, from his consulate to his loss of the empire, and that even at Waterloo was recorded by Great Britain upon her medals, for even the soldiers as well as officers. Denon of France and Ryan of England are names as artists worthy to record the victories of Napoleon and Wellington. Architecture, sculpture, paintings, coins, and medals from the investigation contained in the previous pages we submit to the judgment of the reader are established for historical records. I'm going to reread that to correct something. Architecture, sculpture, paintings, coins, and medals from the investigation contained in the previous pages we submit to the judgment of the reader are established as authorities for historical records. Section 4, engraved gems. This is a branch of the fine arts, the most ancient in practice, or that is mentioned in history, sacred or profane, and although gems are not received like coins or medals as conclusive proofs of events, yet they cannot be rejected on the score of doubtful antiquity. Seals and signet rings are, of course, included in the term engraved gems, and they bear the heraldic arms of family honors. Their names and actions are traceable, and thus they illustrate the chivalric dignities of the original owners. The style of ancient art, even without a date to the gem, will carry the inquiring mind to the era of the artist, and thence establish at least the century in which they were engraved. The of the antiquity of gem engraving, the Bible bears conclusive evidence. In the graphic description of the priestly garments of Aaron, Exodus 10:10, which will be 25:28, it states that the shoulder ornaments of the ephod are to be engraved stones, each containing 6 of the names of the tribes of Israel. And thou shalt take, and this is quote, and thou shalt take 2 onyx stones and grave on them the names of the children of Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the other 6 names of the rest on the other stone, according to their birth, with the work of an engraver in stone, like the engravings of a signet, shalt thou engrave the 2 stones with the names of the children of Israel. Verses 9, 10, and 11. Aaron's breastplate of judgment was to contain 12 precious stones or gems, each stone to have engraved upon it the name of a tribe of Israel. And thou shalt set in it settings of stone, even 4 rows of stones. The first row shall be a sardius, in other words, ruby, a topaz, and a carbuncle. This shall be the first row. And the second row shall be an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. And the third row, a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, and an onyx, and a jasper. They shall be with the names of the children. I'm going to go back. And the fourth row, a beryl, and an onyx, and a jasper. They shall be set in gold in their enclosings. And the stones shall be with the names of the children of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet. Every one with his name shall they be according to the 12 tribes. Verses 17 through 21. The gold mitre for the high priest is thus described, and thou, and thou shalt make a plate of pure gold and grave upon it, like the engravings of a signet, holiness to the Lord, unquote. Volume 36, excuse me, not volume, correction, verse 36. From the triplicated sentence in the above quotations, this, quote, like the engravings of a signet, unquote. It is proved that gem engraving was practiced anterior, that's before the time of Aaron, who officiated 1491, years before Christ. The great antiquity, therefore, of sculptured gems will not be questioned, and their mottos, ciphers, or style of art may speak of a people, their epochs, or their progress in civilization. In the development of the present work, every branch of the fine arts will be brought forward to uphold and substantiate this Tyrian era, they having all obtained in the Western Hemisphere previous to the time of Columbus, which period anterior to the Genesis 1492 AD is contemplated by the new historic term Ancient America. Now, for some of you all who still do not believe that the African Americans are Amerindians. Remember at the beginning of the preface in the first chapter, Indian was a misnomer. So I'm going to correct myself. For those of you who are still having issues with whether or not the reclassified African American, and you can review Plecker's letter, and if you have enough hateful people to make those changes on documents that they shouldn't have made, and then reclassify those Amerindians, or reclassify the Aboriginals of the North and Southeast Coast Americas to Black, colored, Negro, Black, Black American, to African American, you are doing an injustice to the world. To continue that, you're doing an injustice to yourself, because that marginalized group of people, it appears that you'll have to answer to God. And I don't want to get into that, but the reading of this is such a powerful read. It's such a powerful read that by two chapters already, he's pointed out a lot of evidence. Then he brings in the evidence and times of the paintings, the artwork, the medals, coins, paintings, which is probably more than likely going to be tied into many of the findings in the America, like in the mounds on the tribal land prior to the artifacts found in along the north, that east coast, Mississippi, Alabama. Prior chapters, he also brought up the fact that the Mexican and the Amerindian are two different races. He said that they're distinctively different. The reclassified African American is the Aborigines. So we are currently on page 75, but in the book, as you can see here, we will pick up on chapter 5, page 49. As a PDF, it is page 74. And we will pick up on chapter 5, probably 6, I'm not for certain, of this reading. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining me. And those who haven't already, please go ahead and take the time to subscribe. And look forward to a live to discuss your opinions. Hopefully by this time you will have already gotten your free PDF copy to follow along, to raise questions and feedback within the chat. Just want you to form a different opinion when you're dealing with the children and or the descendants of the book of Genesis. I had no idea that these chapters would be pertaining to any prophecies He mentioned the prophecies in chapter 3, I believe, 3 or 4, 3, beginning of 4. And what you are seeing right now happening, rumors of wars, those above will be below, and they still are not kind to each other, especially not kind to the chosen people. You got people locked up, mass incarceration, that ended up getting a strike just from being on their own block in their own neighborhood. And that's one strike. So after another strike of standing around, by that time they all mad and got to do whatever they got to do to survive. With intentional drugs put in the neighborhood and weapons put in the neighborhood. And so it takes a lot to have no remorse. It takes a lot of strength not to have no remorse for the people that you're intentionally doing and that you know are the descendants of Genesis. All right, you know, I'm behind. It was a week of a lot of stuff going on, a lot of findings that I came across. I don't want to miss that in with this, but it's just the thought of how misinformation, and especially the attempt at eliminating all information and history regarding the true atrocities of people of color and their forefathers. I want you to set your notifications so that you can tune in to the next scheduled live here at the My History Verified YouTube channel.